guys made the trouble to show up tonight and crawl out of your sweatpants and off the couch and into the wild. You're as nerded out as I am about Ayurveda and everything that this girl's talking about. So this will be really fun. We're going to talk a little bit about Ayurveda and like food and beauty. So to most of us, I think at this point, like food and beauty are such like an obviously interconnected, you know, the two topics are so obviously interconnected, but it's a really interesting topic, especially in Ayurveda.
Yes.
So I want to dive deep a little bit with that on you. I'm excited. First of all, let's kind of tell everyone who's not familiar already with the Sahara Rose world, what your brand's all about and about your new book.
Yes, so I just wrote this little guide right here, The Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. So I'm sure you guys know, maybe you guys don't, but Ayurveda is the world's oldest health system. It originated in ancient India 5,000 years ago.
Factual?
Yeah, 5,000 years ago, like older than Buddha, older than Jesus, older than anyone, anything. And it's the system that all other health systems are based off of: Chinese medicine, Western medicine, kind of everything has its roots back down to Ayurveda, and it's the sister science of yoga. So if you practice yoga and you're trying to get healthier, more balanced, get rid of anxiety, it's actually Ayurveda you're practicing. Because yoga is a spiritual practice, but Ayurveda is a mind-body holistic healing system.
So interesting. I love that you mentioned that about yoga because, you know, obviously yoga's really blown up in like our lifetime.
Yes.
At least here in the States. And I don't think very many people, you know, is a percentage of people who, maybe people who are hardcore yogis, of course, but in general, I don't think people make an obvious correlation between yoga and Ayurveda. Why do you think that is? Why do you think yoga took off so much without its like parents, Ayurveda?
Yeah, well, I think Ayurveda is going to be the next thing. Like in the next few years, you're going to see Ayurveda just as out there as yoga. It's in every single yoga teacher training. It's a requirement to learn about, but most of the yoga teachers have never really learned about it. So they're like, how do I share something that's like so complicated? All these words are in Sanskrit when I don't really know. So they're like, oh, like take this quiz on like Deepak Chopra's website and like your vata, bye.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of what it's been, and there's so much more to it. So that's why I chose to move to India and study there and like really dig deep into the wisdom, but put it into modern language that makes sense for us, for free people shoppers, for people like us who know a little bit about the world, but we're mostly like, how can I apply this into my life? We're not trying to become Ayurvedic doctors. We just want to know how is this going to make me healthier, happier, and more beautiful.
Right. So cool. How did you first get into Ayurveda? Like what really turned you on to it, made you fly to India and really go all in?
Yeah, I mean, I had no interest in Ayurveda. I actually heard about it, and I loved how there was a quiz. I love personality quizzes. It's like so my thing, but I didn't resonate with any of the suggestions. It was a lot of ghee. I was like raw vegan and a lot of rice. I'm low carb, and I was like, oh, none of this is really going to work out for me. But I had really bad digestive issues and hormonal issues. I didn't get my period for more than a year. I was super bloated, constipated, gassy, like all of the things that you should not be if you're like a healthy raw vegan. So I basically came to Ayurveda as like my last resort because I tried everything else and nothing else was working. And just from following a few of the suggestions, but modernizing it and making it plant-based, I felt so much better, not just in my body, but also in my mind. And that's what made me be like, oh my God, what else is there to this?
Yeah. I love that you're saying that because I can't tell you how many of our favorite wellness pros like came into what they really study and what they're helping others do because they had their own health crisis. So it's so amazing to see people like turn their own health crisis into support for other people dealing with the same thing.
Otherwise, you wouldn't care. It's like, why should I waste my time learning this complicated thing?
Definitely. Yeah. And digestion is actually like a really like trending. It's so funny, like all the, you know, dotting the I's and crossing our T's around digestion. It's not a super sexy topic, but it's actually very sexy and like trendy and wellness right now.
Gut health is like the thing.
Yes, gut health. So maybe we start there as far as how Ayurveda, like how big is gut health and digestion in Ayurveda?
Yeah. So what I loved about Ayurveda is it's not you are what you eat, but you are what you digest. Like digestion is the most important thing in Ayurveda.
Break that down. Like what do you really mean by that?
Yeah.
I think that's so crucial.
Yeah, so a lot of us, like at least I used to think, I studied sports nutrition, so it's a lot of like, okay, how many calories are in it, how many macros, micros. So I was looking at food like at the food label and like, oh, this has vitamin C, this has that. So, but why isn't it feeling like this in my body? Why do I feel tired all the time? And then learning about the energies of food, which, you know, who's like, oh, that's cooling, that's warming, this, that. But these energies of food actually affect how we digest them. So I remember when I was a kid, you know, I would just like drink Coke and like ice cream and stuff. My mom's like, it's too cooling on your system. get too cold. I was like, I'm not cold, I feel fine. But she was talking about my digestion.
Yes.
So now with Chinese medicine and things like that, I think Chinese medicine is like a big gateway for people because they experience acupuncture. And then the acupuncturist is like, oh, you need warming foods. And then they start to learn more about like digestion, Ayurveda, and then the connection. So Chinese medicine does have food, but it's more focused on like the body, whereas Ayurveda is much more focused on food and digestion.
Oh, that's interesting. I never really made the correlation between the two. Because they're both so ancient and there's a lot in common.
Yeah.
So explain that a little bit. Let's break down that whole thing of cooling foods, warming foods, that whole matrix of things for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, so Ayurveda breaks it down more than just warming, cooling into the doshas. So there's 3 doshas, which are Vata, which is air. So when you think of the air, like what do you think of?
Yeah, someone light.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and in terms of skin, if I have like really airy skin, what do you think that would be like?
Let's say maybe thin, maybe dry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have Vata skin, it's thin, it's dry, maybe tendency towards like eczema. Your hair is also thin, dry. Maybe your hair falls out a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I was experiencing hardcore when I was a raw vegan. Just so much of my hair was coming out all the time, and I was sort of pale. I have really dark under eye circles, and you know, when you see those people, it's like, oh, you feel it. Like you need a warm soup or something. It's like you intuitively want to give that to them. So that's Vata, air. And then Pitta is fire. So if someone has a lot of like fire in their systems, what do you think that means?
Yeah, I mean all the same symbolic stuff, right? Like fiery digestion, fiery skin.
Exactly.
We all kind of know what those things could be.
Exactly.
I want to know too, like how many people know their doshas already? I would like about half.
Yeah.
So, which is to be expected, right, if you're kind of interested in hearing more about Ayurveda and beauty. So it's really interesting, because I think if you polled a room, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
no one would know.
Yeah. So it's really cool how it's beginning to be so much more useful to people.
Yes, and I think with the doshas, it's like we are experiencing these issues all the time, and it changes. It's not like you have one dosha and that's what you are forever. I explain in the book, but you have your prakriti, which is what you're born with, and your vikriti, which is what you have today. So a lot of people take the quiz and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense, because I only feel like that sometimes, but not all the times. Like you might go through a period of your life where you have a lot of acne, which is fire, or you have like, I was just talking about how I went to Europe and I was eating a lot of cheese because there's no vegetarian food. And I started getting all these like white like blemishes, like kind of whiteheads underneath my skin, and it was because my body could not break down the dairy, and it was trying to eliminate the toxin through my skin, because your skin is your largest detoxification system.
Yeah, say that again, because I feel like that's a great thing. If we're going to talk about beauty and beauty and Ayurveda, that's a huge key, right? Your skin is your largest detoxification organ. So that's a perfect example of you changed your diet and you see it coming up through your skin right away. I mean, we're bouncing all around. I want to make sure people have an opportunity to hear the full thing of warming, cooling, and the doshas. But I also want to come back to the skin and talking about how that shows up with your diet. Do you feel like we really covered the doshas and
so
the basics?
Vata, airy. So anything airy. So airy in your mind is like, you know, anxiety, having a lot of thoughts, like you're, you know, someone who's really airy, they're kind of bouncing around, they have a lot of energy, but sometimes they crash. So that's a Vata personality. And then a lot of air in your body is literally like gas. So you have a lot of gas filled up, bloating, air stuck in your system, as well as constipation, because if your colon is dry and airy, you're going to be constipated.
Yeah.
So that's Vata, and that's the thing that most women have the imbalance in. And Vata is the dosha that most easily falls out of balance as well.
Interesting.
And right now we're in Vata season in the fall. So naturally all of our Vatas are going to be more raised right now than they were in the summertime.
So interesting. What is the correlation between the doshas and the seasons generally?
Yeah, so you can just look at the quality of the air and it's going to tell you kind of what dosha it is. So right now in the fall, it's really cold, it's windy, it's dry, so our Vatas are going to go up.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's like back to school season. Everyone's like, even if we're not in school, you know, you're doing new things, you're kind of going to different events, and it's a very Vata time where you're like bouncing around. But it's super important to warm your body, ground your body, create some sort of routine. That's why naturally, like the earth harvests like pumpkins and squash, because your body actually needs those more warming and grounding foods when you're in the Vata season.
Definitely. So it gets into everything we think of as like seasonal eating.
Totally.
And some of the food combining things. But they're really rooted in just this one Ayurvedic Okay, what about the other doshas?
So in terms of seasons, then fall goes into winter, and in winter it gets more cool but also more wet. So here it doesn't snow, most parts of the world snows, but here it could get really rainy. So that's when you go into your winter slump and you really don't feel like leaving your house and you don't really have that same like vata energy, and it goes into like hibernation mode. And all animals hibernate, it's natural to feel that way. But what happens is your body starts gaining weight and you start craving the heavier foods, and you do need those, but it's really important you don't go off balance and start eating the wrong heavy foods. Like maybe you could have done really well with like a coconut curry, but instead you're just eating like mac and cheese. So that's kapha. So kapha is earth energy. You feel really earthy, you feel really grounded, you feel heavy. And what aggravates kapha is dairy. So what I was just mentioning about the skin, if you're eating a lot of dairy products, in that kapha time, it's definitely going to go up. Now, some people naturally have more kapha in them. Like me as a kid, I had a lot of kapha in me, and you can tell because I have a round face. You can tell from the shape of someone's face, like what dosha they are. So for me, if I start following like a really heavy diet, lots of like meat and stuff, I'm going to feel like crap. I'm going to feel horrible. Whereas you have a lot more vata in you, just from the shape of your face, that those foods, maybe eating more animal products stuff, would work really well for you. So yeah, that's kapha, and then it gets a little warmer, we go into the spring, and it becomes summertime, and it's pitta. So fire is like, you're out, you're active, you're doing new things, you want to exercise, but your body naturally needs more cooling foods. So just like in the summertime, we want like melons and coconut water and things like that, and that's because it's pitta season. And in your body, you start to feel more hot. So if you're going to, hot yoga class and then it's 100 degrees outside, probably you're going to break out into hives, or your skin is going to get really irritable. And in the digestive system, you might notice hyperacidity because your digestion is a fire. So if there's too much fire, the digestion is going to go into overload, basically. So it's a lot of information, but think like super intuitive. Like, okay, what fire? What would this feel like in my mind? What would it feel like in my body, earth, etc.? And it's like the most baseline answer is probably the right one.
It's very intuitive.
Yes.
Once you kind of lock into the three like symbolic doshas.
Yes.
So cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are in the fall, like you said. What angle do we start even tackling? What are kind of most of us dealing with? If it's a vata season, maybe we start with vata beauty and skin issues. Then, even though we're all kinds of doshas.
Right.
What are some of the kind of common beauty issues that are going on when vata's ramped up?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us, we know about this, like changing your diet for the season, but we don't really change our skincare products, and this is also super important.
I love that topic. Yeah, it's not really talked about enough.
Right, because like what you use in the summer, that moisturizer might be way too heavy for you, right? Or might be too light for you now, and it would have been too heavy for you in the summer. So what you're using on your skin needs to constantly move. So Ayurveda uses a lot of oils. The reason they use oils is because they believe, it's true that whatever you put on your skin is immediately absorbed into your bloodstream. Yeah. So if you're putting something with tons of chemicals, even if it's from like Trader Joe's or something, those chemicals are going into your bloodstream. So if you wouldn't eat it, you shouldn't put it on your skin. So sesame oil is the mother oil, and it's considered the mother oil because it's so warming. So sesame oil is like the go-to oil for the fall season, whatever dosha that you're in. Cool. So sesame oil on your skin, not toasted sesame oil that you use for like Asian cooking, but like raw sesame oil, which you can get like online or so many places. Putting that in your skin, oil pulling with that, and then even cooking with it as well. So lots of sesame right now.
So internal, external.
Yeah, like I just have a jar and I'm just like kind of using it on everything.
It's like pure coconut oil.
Exactly. But in the summer, it was coconut oil.
Yeah,
it was
okay.
Really cooling.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Is there another one for another season?
Yeah, so kaphas do well with like olive oil. You can do olive oil in the skin, so it's a lighter, or Ayurveda recommends safflower oil, but I honestly prefer not to use it because it's higher in like omega-6s, so I'd rather use the olive oil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I love that. So you're cycling through a skin oil that you're using for oil pulling and all that kind of thing, which might be a great topic to talk about.
Yeah.
So with beauty, detox plays a huge role, right? And daily detoxing routines. Maybe you want to go through a couple of them, but definitely oil pulling.
Yes. Yeah, I wrote this article on Chalkboard about like my daily morning routine, which you guys can check out. But some of the ones that I practice on a daily basis are, first of all, tongue scraping. Have any of you guys tried tongue scraping before? So
I have to say, it sounds so terrifying.
Right.
You know what it
When
is,
you, like, see
but then
that
it is absolutely addictive, and I feel
Oh
like
my God, it's
you
like,
don't feel like you've showered
Yeah.
or anything unless you do this daily.
Yeah.
Once you're hooked.
and it's so good because you can see, they call it ama in Ayurveda. Ama means toxin. So ama is the white stuff on your tongue, and you can see, like, after a certain meal, like the next day, maybe you have more ama than other days. So it's like you're instantly like able to check in with yourself and knowing like this worked for me, this didn't work for me. Even from the color of the ama, it tells you what dosha is off balance.
Whoa.
Yeah, even the place. I have a tongue chart on my website, and the area of your tongue that it's in. From your tongue, you can tell so many things. So if you just look at your tongue and you see like there's a crack in the middle, it's a vata imbalance. If there's a red tip, it's a pitta imbalance. If there's like a dull white coating, or if it's like really like heavy, that's a kapha imbalance. So having a relationship with your tongue is like the best thing that you can do for yourself.
And I have to say, so for those of us who are lucky enough to be in this room, we have Surya bread here from one of our favorite Ayurvedic spas in LA, Surya Spa, and they have this bread called Surya bread, and it's like gluten-free, grain-free. It's so clean, and it's so incredible. But Surya Spa is owned by this woman named Marta, who is like this incredible Ayurvedic doctor. I highly recommend her for spa treatments or just for treatments overall health-wise. But yeah, the first thing that happens when you go see Marta is she reads your tongue, which I'm sure is the same for all Ayurvedic doctors. And I have to say, it grosses me out, the idea of really getting in there and trying to figure out what's going on with my doshas.
Right.
But I'm also really intrigued by everything you're saying.
Yeah. I know, it's like kind of weird because most of us were like, you never really look at your tongue, but once you do, it's like, you start getting curious about it. And like, you don't need to every day like sit in the mirror and like stare at your tongue, but if it's like just from the tongue scraping, like I'll notice like it's a little bit darker in color, or it's a little whiter, and just from that I can tell like if there's
What are some like basic things that people should know about if they're gonna tongue scrape and kind of tune into what's going on in your body? What are some like easy tips?
Yeah, so Vata tongues tend to be drier if you're noticing you're having like a dry mouth.
And does this mean, not that you are Vata or Pitta, but that
Vata
you're imbalanced in that direction?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're experiencing dryness in your mouth, if the whiteness on your tongue has a little bit of gray, that's Vata. If it has yellow, it's Pitta, because Pitta is in charge of bile. So it's actually like the excess bile secretion.
It gets really, like, it's a lot.
Yeah. And then Kapha just has like a lot of like white. It's like coated in white. So just from that you'll be able to tell. But you'll also, the symptoms will show up in your body. Like an easier way just to know is like, am I feeling bloated, gassy, constipated? Vata. Am I feeling acidic? Pitta. Am I feeling heavy, sluggish? Kapha. That's probably easier than like diving into tongue reading and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, your pulse tells a lot too.
So tongue scraping, great daily detox tool, and oil pulling. You want to maybe kind of break that down. I feel like so many people are familiar now with oil pulling, but just in case, we don't want to leave anyone out on Facebook hanging.
Yeah.
Let's talk about oil pulling a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So oil pulling is like Ayurvedic mouthwash. So when you use an antibacterial mouthwash, you're killing everything. You're killing the good bacteria, you're killing the bad bacteria. It's just like taking an antibiotic. So what happens, just like when you take an antibiotic, is the bad bacteria begins to flourish over time because there's no good bacteria to kind of balance it out.
Yeah.
So what happens is people become addicted to like Listerine strips or like using their mouthwash after every workout. You see in all these workout places there's mouthwash. I'm like, wait, why? But it's because their bodies have so much toxins is when they're sweating, they're experiencing it in their breath as well. It's all pitta related. So if you're using oil, it's the same thing as you're cleaning wood, or like a wood floor. If you're using water, you're not really getting into the wood, but if you use oil, you'll be able to really like penetrate deep into the pores of the wood. So the same thing with oil in your mouth. You're able to remove the bad bacteria without destroying the good bacteria. So it's not as intense. You're not going to be like, oh, I feel like Listerine fresh after, but like over time, it's going to be getting rid of the bad bacteria.
Yeah, so great.
And it doesn't need to be 20 minutes. I think like somewhere in America, they wrote some article that you have to oil pull for 20 minutes, and I like asked my teachers in India, they're like, no, like 3-5 minutes.
That's such a great point.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's like the barrier that keeps us from like committing to a habit, right? It's like, do I really have, can I commit? But it's just like with workouts, like get in what you can.
Right. I mean, exactly. And like 3 to 5 minutes is so enough. Like if you think 20 minutes are nothing and you don't practice it, then it's definitely not going to help you.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, what about more daily detox tips? And then let's get back into the doshas. As far as getting these doshas balanced is so fascinating, hearing even what we've already talked about. But it seems to be kind of the key to getting balanced, which has to do with beauty a whole lot.
For sure.
Balanced digestion, balanced skin.
Yes.
It all kind of works from there.
Yes.
But did you have more daily detox tips you want to share first?
For sure. So there's dry brushing. Have you guys ever done dry brushing?
Another one I feel like it's gotten really
popular. Yeah. So it's just like taking a dry loofah and scrubbing your skin always towards the heart. You never want to go down, and if you're doing your stomach, you always want to go with your digestive system, not against it. So this basically removes all the dead skin cells that are like blocking your skin from really breathing and taking in prana, life force. So that's a really good practice. And then what's the best thing to do is to put the oil on your skin, like right now sesame oil, taking a shower and then putting more oil on. That's like the best, because then the oil can really penetrate into your pores. But if you don't have time, then you can just take a shower and put the oil after. But doing the oil before and then being in a warm shower is really going to help it get deeper.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I've actually never done that. I feel like I've read that a couple times. I've never made the leap outside my like American ways of
shower
bubbles.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Even in your bath, just putting in some oils, because we are stripping our skin so much. Like people always ask me, how do you have great skin? I literally never use soap. Ever. I'm trying to never clean my skin unless I have makeup on it. But the more you try to clean something, remove something, the more that thing is going to grow. So oils are a really good way, because a lot of them have antibacterial properties, but they're not removing anything from your skin either.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Seems like such a major leap for someone who's as addicted to products as I am.
For sure.
Make the oil
like the 4-step cleansing
but
treatment.
your skin's really selling me. So. Okay, well let's dive deep into beauty. So, I mean, it is related to digestion, but where do we even begin? I mean, do you have things people ask you all the time about Ayurvedic beauty?
Yeah.
For sure. I'm like, I almost want to start asking questions, because it's like,
go ahead.
Yeah.
It really, the beauty of it is like I can't just give one answer, because it's so dependent on the dosha. So so probably the biggest issue people have is acne. That's probably the thing that will bother you the most, because it's like it's the worst when you're going out and you feel so self-conscious. So that's all related to pitta. So pitta is the fire one that we talked about, and your digestion is a fire. So imagine,
what does that have to do with why are so many women pitta imbalanced?
It's because of the lifestyle, a lot of it. It's like we're moving and we're active and we're stressed out.
So it's the overactivity.
Yeah, overactivity, being in your masculine, like energetically, women, especially in India, they took care of themselves. It was like expected, like during the day you're going to put your oil in your hair and stuff, and now we don't practice that. So just that creates a quality called rajas, which is like aggression, because we're always on go mode. Wow. So that's going to create it. It's our diets, eating a lot of pitta foods, so lots of onions and garlic. In Ayurveda, if you're on a yogic path, you're on the path towards, enlightenment, you're not supposed to eat onions and garlic. And there's onions and garlic in almost everything that we eat. Yeah. In Ayurveda, they say if your goal is to be a householder, which means you're not trying to become like an enlightened, person in Rishikesh, you can eat onions and garlic. But if your goal is to be a yogi, you're not supposed to eat that. And these foods can aggravate pitta, as well as tomatoes, nightshades. Like there's so much research now on nightshades and just its correlation with like inflammation in the body, and pitta is inflammation. So we're seeing these Ayurvedic things written about 5,000 years ago are like now being proven by science.
Interesting. And will you add to that if pitta is also related to inflammation, you add to that all the lifestyle, all the products, all the personal care products, all the foods, and all the inflammatory responses we're having to all the magic dust we started putting in our products, 50 years ago that we're now discovering maybe aren't the best way to go.
Right. I mean, now with Johnson & Johnson, like baby powder and like the huge lawsuit that's going on, it's like, oh wait, this is like cancerous for babies? Yeah. Who wasn't given baby powder?
I have to say, especially since most of our audience on Facebook and here today is mostly female, we're running a crazy story today on on breast cancer awareness, and I came across a really incredible organization. I won't botch their name, so I'll just say go and read it so I don't actually botch it, but there's some really incredible prevention tips on there, and a lot of them have to do with the kind of stuff we're talking about today, but also your personal care products. I found them shocking, and I talk and think and research about this stuff every day, but very interesting, I have to say, about how to clean up a few things. But it's all related to inflammation and inflammatory response. We're having to just the toxic load we're getting every day.
Right. And if you notice, like you're sweating and your sweat has a strong smell, like a pungent smell, which is a question I get a lot, that's pitta. That's literally your body trying to get rid of toxins. So even from the smell of your sweat, if it's a stronger odor, that means you're eating something that you're not really able to detoxify from.
Okay, crazy. So pitta balancing.
So this is all pitta related. So pitta, so if your digestion is a fire rises obviously. You know, if we have a heater on, it's going to be warmer up here than it is down there. So the fire rises and it's trying to escape, and it shows up in your skin. So even in Spanish, like if someone has acne, they're like, "El tiene fuego." That's what they say. It's in all of these different systems. So it's literally like fire trying to escape from you. So you have to cool the fire down. Where? From the gut. So avoiding the nightshades, the tomatoes, anything spicy. You know, we put so much sriracha on food. We go to Thai food, Mexican food. It's like so much hot because I believe it's because we're lacking stimulation in our minds, that we're seeking it in our diets. Like, oh, I need to eat this food to feel this certain way. And if we're constantly seeking our stimulation from our foods, we're going to become addicted to sweet foods, spicy foods, salty foods, and these tastes all aggravate pitta as well.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, what you're saying. I love that. So what about underlying gut issues? Because obviously there are a lot of people who might say, hey, I've tried to eliminate spicy foods, but I'm not seeing the change in my skin. What about like the deeper underlying issues? Or, you know, does it have to do with leaky gut?
So kind of it all stems down to leaky gut, because if you have leaky gut, which is literally like small holes like in your stomach, which are making toxins like candida, which is a yeast overgrowth, escape and go into your bloodstream. So these issues didn't really exist even 50 years ago. It's growing more now, more than ever. About 40% of Americans have autoimmune disease, which is every single person with autoimmune disease has leaky gut. So, and because of that, which has made it super tricky as I'm writing my next book, is they can't eat grains and legumes, which are a huge staple of the Ayurvedic diet. So they're how can I practice Ayurveda when I can't eat anything traditionally Ayurvedic? So from the Ayurvedic perspective, 5,000 years ago, this didn't exist, but it's really because the Agni, the fire, is not breaking down food properly. And when it's not breaking down food correctly, this causes leaky gut. And then the toxins spread into your bloodstream, and then you start experiencing these issues. So even if you looked at pictures of your grandparents, like no one had acne back then. This is all very new. But the amazing thing is that we can know just from healing our digestive system, we can eliminate so many diseases. And they're seeing now like studies of kids with ADHD and even Asperger's, they give them probiotics and it goes away. So interesting. For another show. It is so interesting how many we're finding. There's like 2 or 3 buckets that all these conditions stem from. And leaky gut's a really interesting one. We've kind of come full circle back into now I'm blanking, but when we just touched on something about the gut that we had talked about in the beginning. Oh my gosh, not leaky gut or probiotics. Just the digestive fire and...
I'm totally blanking, but it's
all just interconnected. So.
Yeah, it is all interconnected. I'll remember in a moment. But as far as daily behaviors then and that kind of thing, obviously, like you said, it has to do with everyone's different doshas. But does it to you come down to going through a certain kind of detox if you have, you know, leaky gut and that kind of thing, or is it really just kind of an everyday detox kind of thing?
Yeah, I think doing like seasonal detoxes is a really good idea. An Ayurvedic detox is very different from like a juice cleanse. A juice cleanse is like super cooling for your system. So if you're already very vata, it's probably not a good idea for you. So an Ayurvedic detox is typically khichdi, which is like a traditional blend.
I've had khichdi before,
Yeah, it's like a traditional blend of like rice and moong dal, which is like a type of pulse. They call it lentils, but it's actually not. And it's cooked in different herbs and spices that are for your digestive system, like cumin, cardamom, coriander, etc. And you can customize it for your dosha. So the way that I do it, I don't eat rice. So I use quinoa.
I was going to ask you, so, if people are grain-free,
right,
how are they dealing?
Right. So I make it with quinoa, and I also add a Japanese sea vegetable called kombu, which makes any legume super easy to digest. I have like a 3-day khichdi cleanse on my website you guys can check out, but I put the kombu in there because a lot of people have issues digesting beans because we're not used to it. Before it was like everyone would do it, they would soak it. Now most of the beans we get are canned, so just cooking the kombu in, it's going to help it.
Yeah.
And just doing that for 3 days, it doesn't need to be more than that, and just giving your system a chance from you go to a salad bar, you're eating like 50 different ingredients in there, and it's cold, and then there's like a heavy like dressing on it, and it might be, again, like textbook kale, healthy foods, but the easiest thing for your body to digest is something that requires no energy, and that's why khichdi is so healthy for you, because you just eat it, it's no energy expenditure, and your body can focus on detoxifying and healing your system, because 80% of our daily energy expenditure is used on digestion.
Right.
So if you can give your body just a little bit more energy to work on other things, your body can like figure it out. We're trying to get facials and do this and that. It's like your body will do the work, just give it a chance.
Yeah, just give it some R&R and the chance it needs to restore itself.
Yes. Yeah.
You were talking about digestion. It's not what we eat, but it's what we digest.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to remember
Yes.
in the beginning that you were talking about, because I think it's such a wonderful point. It's
right.
It's not really the way a lot of us were raised to think.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the common things people are eating but not digesting that might have some like beauty with issues?
Right. Well, the first thing that I think people eat a lot and don't digest are salads. Salads are kind of like, oh, I'm healthy, I'm just eating salads, and tons of us cannot digest it. So I went from being a raw vegan to not being able to eat raw foods for like probably a year and a half, nothing.
That
raw.
must have been a big transition.
It was so hard because it was like, first of all, I didn't want to cook. So I think the reason a lot of us eat raw foods is because it's easier. It's like you can just throw together a salad. So I was like, oh, it takes time. I have to warm everything up on a stove, and you can't use a microwave either. But I noticed, like, I was just so used to after every meal being super bloated, and I wasn't, and I was like, oh, I thought I just had one of those bodies that gets bloated after everything, but it was literally because there was so much fiber in that salad that my body was trying to break down, that it was literally distending, because it took so much energy expenditure.
Yeah, ooh, so interesting.
Yeah. So salads is a big one. Dairy is a huge one.
Yeah. So is there no dairy in Ayurvedic diet?
No, there is. They use a lot of dairy products. My version, I don't.
Right.
Because the dairy used 5,000 years ago in India, and even today in India, it's very different from the dairy here.
Yeah, it's raw or it's fermented.
Right, and cows are holy. They're like giving them flowers and like doing ceremonies for them. They have like better lives than the people. So that cow's milk is actually going to be holy, whereas today they're like in factory farms and they're
different quality.
Given antibiotics and estrogen and like all of these things are going to show up in the milk, and it's like, back then, they knew you needed fats in your diet, and ghee was the easiest way because they had a cow and they could milk it and they could get the ghee. Whereas now you can use coconut oil, sesame oil, you can use avocados, tahini. There's so many different alternatives. So I healed my body without using like any dairy products, and it was totally fine.
So interesting the way it's like the modern expression or the like American expression in 2017 of such like an ancient practice. One area we've not gotten into a lot, we've talked a little bit about skin, and there might be questions about skin because I feel like it is the bread and butter of what we're all talking about beauty right now. But let's talk about hair too, because I feel like this whole Ayurvedic situation, usually with girls who are like really into it, is the hair game is so strong. Right. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So I literally probably wash my hair every 2 weeks.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay.
And my hair doesn't get oily at all.
So break it down for us.
So I started when when I was a kid, like my parents are Persian, so there was also, it's very similar to Ayurvedic culture, and they would always tell me, like, I would beg my mom, like, please, I want face wash because on TV they're using it. She's like, no, you can't, like, use strawberries on your face. I'm like, I don't want to put strawberries. And
he's so cool, I think, for 2017.
I know, but back then I was like, my mom always has
Mom.
food on her face. Like, it's so embarrassing. So she would be like, you know, I'm watching TV, she's like, make sure that oil's on your hair. So like, since I was a kid, I'm always just putting food on my skin and my hair. So that helped. And then
It was strong foundation.
right, good foundation. But then when I was like in middle school, I was like, I want to straighten my hair and do this and that. And then I started washing all the time and it started getting oily, and I never experienced that.
Wow.
So I had to wash my hair every single day because it would get oily, and then I'd have to put dry shampoo on it. And it,
Yeah.
you know, I got into that
cycle.
That cycle, right. And then when I was in high school, I was like, I don't want to be in part of the cycle. So I started washing it every 2 days, every 3 days, and gradually just less and less to once a week, every 10 days. Now it's every 2 weeks, and it literally doesn't produce oils. But also while I was doing it, I was putting like oils, like coconut oil scalp treatments, and putting apple cider vinegar with water in my hair too.
Yeah.
So I was using, like, if you Google the no poo method, I was
Yeah.
doing that. And now it's like, it's so manageable, it doesn't get frizzy, and I really believe it's from not having shampoo in my life.
So interesting. So in your own process of like returning to your traditional hair ways,
Yeah.
you did have a transitional period.
Yes.
So have you talked to many girls who've gone through the transition? I mean, no poo's kind of like a fun topic right now.
Yeah.
But are girls usually having trouble with the like transitional
Yeah.
period? Is it a rocky period?
I mean, it's like you have to get a hairband, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna look oily. That's gonna show up. It's gonna take a long time, especially if you've been washing your hair every day for years.
Yeah.
But it's really like not as big of a deal as you think. Like, you think everyone's like staring at your scalp and like, she over there has an oily scalp. And like, literally no one notices. Like, sometimes when it would look oily, I would just put more like coconut oil on it and like put it in a braid. So it's just like, oh, it's not an oily scalp, I just have like oil in my hair. I guess that's kind of weird, but like now it's not. Like, people walk around with like oil in their hair, and I always am braiding it. And in India, it's a requirement in school to come to school with plaids, braids with coconut oil. They won't let you in school if you don't have it in, because they don't want hair falling around. But it's also why Indian women have such strong hair.
Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about oiling the hair, like what are you using, and how long are you keeping it in? Walk us through.
I'll keep it in as long as I can. So
Okay.
some people do like 15 minutes. Like, I will leave it in there for 1 to 2 days.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
and like I will put it in my hair, and then the next day I'll notice it's starting to dry up, especially on the ends, because that's where it's drier. So I'll add more,
Yeah.
and I just leave it in a braid, because that way it can just kind of like be in itself. One thing that a lot of us do is we put these buns on the top of our hair, and it's like, this is like the most sensitive part of your scalp, and if you have this heavy bun, it's going to lead to breakage long term.
Yeah.
So it's much better to just do a low braid.
Yeah.
And there is amla oil. Amla is an Indian fruit, and it's specifically used to help your hair growth. You can find it at any Indian supermarket. So when I was younger, I would use a lot more amla oil and the different like Indian ones. But I think now most of the time it will just be coconut or sesame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious who here oils their hair, or who has tried it or experimented with it. Yeah. Less than some of the other traditions. Yeah, I think there's probably like a learning curve, or
It feels good, you know. You take a shower and you're just like oil everywhere.
well, I think the big payoff here is that you would never have to wash your hair for like a 2-week period,
Right.
which seems very compelling.
Yes.
So good.
Yeah, just think about it. Like,
Yeah.
how old is shampoo? Like, maybe 100 years old. Like, what were people doing before that?
Yeah. I mean, how good did they look? Maybe. I guess in India they were probably looking like banging.
Yeah.
Well, I want to open it up for questions, and we can maybe return to a couple more beauty
Yeah.
points. But I just want to give people an opportunity before we get too late into things. If any of you have packed your cues ready for Sahara Rose on Ayurveda, yeah, go ahead.
Just about oil pulling, what oil would you recommend?
So if you're more vata, like cold and dry, sesame oil. If you're more pitta, more coconut oil, and kaphas can do either, or you can rotate it to the season if you don't really feel like really strongly of any of the doshas. Yeah.
What's your take on smoothies?
Yeah, so Ayurveda traditionally doesn't do smoothies. But I just make sure they're warming. So I don't use frozen fruits. I'll use like room temperature, regular fruits and berries. I don't put ice in it. I'll use.
And this is true of Chinese medicine as well.
Exactly.
Not a lot of really
frozen
chilled
anything.
foods.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, if your digestion is a fire and you're putting something frozen on it, it's like that's so much
Slowing
extra
it down.
energy.
Yeah.
Because your system is trying to take something that's like below 32 degrees up to 100 degrees, which is your internal organ, 70-degree difference. Imagine how much energy that takes for your body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why nothing frozen. Of course, it tastes really yum to have like something like ice cream, but you do get used to it. So I'll add like sweet potato and different like root vegetables to my smoothies, like cauliflower, zucchini, things like that. Like I'm putting a lot of like warming smoothie ingredients. And if you're like, no, absolutely not, at least add ginger. If you're gonna have something cooling, just add ginger to it, and that's gonna help. Yeah, just a little bit of ginger root, exactly. So that's gonna help with your Agni, the fire, a little bit more, or some cinnamon.
Yeah.
Cinnamon helps too.
Yeah, cinnamon is like such a miracle. It's like such an easy thing to overlook. It's like, it's free on every coffee bar.
Right.
But it's like kind of a miracle.
Yeah. I always say I get my free Ayurvedic tea everywhere I go. I just ask for hot water and I put cinnamon. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have cinnamon tea for free.
So cool.
Yeah.
On that note, like the opposite of smoothies, I think about how often in our office we're putting all the, potions and special ingredients into like hot drinks. How do you feel about like, after dinner drinks, that kind of thing? What's the Ayurvedic tradition there? Because that's wonderful for your digestion.
Yes, yeah. So Ayurveda says you should be having a sip of something warm every 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's why if you look at like little Chinese people, they're like always drinking tea. Like that's why they are never going to chug like a gallon of like Evian that's like ice cold at once.
Mm-hmm.
They're always just sipping tea, and it's because your colon gets dehydrated very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So you just need a sip, and the closer it is to your internal organs, the easier it is to digest. So having after dinner something like they call it CCFT. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, actually.
Cumin, coriander, and fennel seeds. So half a teaspoon of each and 4 cups of water.
I never see this anywhere. I hear about this like once a year, and every time I have forgotten about it. But will you what's the deal with this? Why do I never see it
4
anywhere?
cups of water, boil it. Half a teaspoon of each cumin, coriander, and fennel seeds. It's tridoshic, meaning it works for any dosha, any season, because the properties, the cumin's more warming, the coriander's more cooling, the fennel goes both ways. And then you let it steep at least 10 minutes, but what I do is I just kind of leave it on my stove overnight, and I just let it sit so it gets like really like spiced.
Yeah.
And then what I do is I'll like put it in a thermos, and I'll bring it with me, and anywhere I go, I get hot water. So I mix some of the hot water, and I just keep drinking that, and it's so good for your digestive system. And fennel seeds, like when you go to Indian restaurants, they like have little fennel seeds after, because fennel's so good for your digestion. So even just chewing on fennel, it's like a huge Ayurvedic thing.
So cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard of that before, but I just think that's so fascinating.
And it's yum. It's like it tastes like licorice.
Yeah. Accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever like buy fennel, like the vegetable?
Rarely. I love to eat it while I'm out, but while at home, I rarely cook with it.
Yeah, it's really easy. Like if you want something to dip in hummus, I always go for fennel because it's really good for your digestive system. And then the stalks, I just cut and put in hot water, and I boil in hot water, and I drink it, and it literally tastes like licorice tea. It's so good. And a lot of people, they throw it away, but it's like just that tea can have so many lives.
Yeah. Okay, so like thesis statement: take good care of your digestion.
Yes, and you'll have
keep the fire high when it's low and low when it's high.
Exactly.
And you'll be glowing.
Yeah, and
then just stop washing your hair.
Right. And like have a relationship with your skin, with your tongue. Like pay attention to these things, because if you don't, and you're like, opposite, and then you're just stressing out about it, it's not going to help. Be like, oh, what was I doing yesterday? What has my life been like? Like, what have I been eating? And then you'll know exactly what it is that threw your skin off.
Just staying in tune.
Yeah.
And also even back to what you were saying about women in general, like that so many of us are out of whack in Vata just because we're a little too nuts.
Yeah. And just the
just
hormones
a good self-care
too,
reminder.
Which is like a whole other discussion, but like, if you have acne on your jaw area, it's all hormonal related.
Yeah, so cool. We have a story in the chalkboard about face mapping, right? So where you're breaking out, what's going on in your skin, different areas as symbolism.
Yes.
It's super fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So I think we probably dropped off Facebook, yeah, which sometimes happens in this space, no big deal. But I want to kind of make sure everyone's had an opportunity to ask more questions. I think we could sit here and quiz you all night.
Yeah, I love that.
But anyone else have more questions for Sahara? Yeah.
Sometimes I'll run to the Whole Foods food bar, and I'm like, oh my God, there's nothing I can eat because there's nothing organic, and my go-to would be the salad bar, but I know I can't digest salads.
Mhm.
So I'm like, oh my God, well, maybe I'll just have sweet potatoes and dal.
Mhm.
And the only thing is that neither of them are organic.
Mhm.
So it's like,
What's your quick go-to?
yeah. What would be in a
Yeah, I
situation
mean,
like that?
like in terms of things that need to be organic, sweet potatoes are not the highest thing on the list because they're like grown under the ground and they're not like sprayed. You're not eating the skin, so it's like not the end of the world if it's not organic. But if you prefer to eat everything organic, fine.
And I've been high in potassium.
Okay.
So I know sweet potatoes, I mean, it's just so hard to figure out what to eat when you've got so many things going on.
Well, I know like Beaming across the street has their Buddha bowls, and they are always rotating different soups there. And there's like I guess I can name specific places like that Kairitos place that's like a little bit down, and they have like some warm stuff, and you can just get like bowls like at Cafe Gratitude or anything. So I think even at Sweetgreens now they have like warm winter bowls.
I go to Creational.
Creation, you know, she's Persian, so she has tons of like Persian spices and a soup called ash, which is a Persian herbal soup. So I think people are really opening up to it, that now even juice bars have like warming options too.
Yeah, I think too the idea of the after dinner teas and that kind of thing is such a great way to go, because even if you're eating something room temperature,
Right.
you have a tea afterward that helps
Yes.
you digest.
Yeah.
It's not the opposite. It's like a nice booster. It's like a power booster.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, so
That
much
and I
better,
think
yeah.
apple cider vinegar. I swear.
Yeah.
It's like my Windex.
Yeah.
But apple cider vinegar.
Yes, apple cider vinegar, it's the only kind of vinegars that pittas are recommended to have.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Questions specific to your dosha, since you're also educated on your doshas? Nada? Everyone's shy?
Just answer the hormones, because that's what, like, usually that would be my problem. That's something that you can balance, like, is that related to, like, that's related to food with Ayurveda, like, everything is food, kind of, like, and that's how you would balance your
I feel like you might know a lot about this, because it's a huge thing I think for
Yeah.
a lot of women is if they have hormonal acne.
So there's different kinds of hormonal imbalances. I think estrogen dominance is probably what's most common right now because we were on birth control for so long, and that's kapha related. But there's also PCOS going on too, which is like the opposite, testosterone dominance. So it depends what it is. Taking ashwagandha is just a really easy way because it works as an adaptogen for the hormones, that whatever's going on, it can solve that. But I would get a blood test and see exactly what your panel's at and get it about 3 weeks after your menstrual cycle, because that's the best time to check for your estrogen levels, and then see what's going on and then treat it accordingly. And there's different, each hormonal imbalance is related to a different dosha. So then if you look up, you know, like PCOS, it's like pitta related, you follow more pitta things, whereas estrogen dominance is kapha related, amenorrhea is vata related. So yeah.
Even if you don't have like a severe condition or whatever, we have, not to keep referring to our own content, it's like my inner encyclopedia, but we have a contributor who talks a ton about healing her own PCOS, which is testosterone dominant, and we have a ton of information about how she healed herself, how she works with clients. So even if you feel you might be leaning that way but not so severe, some of her tips might be kind of like relevant little lifestyle adjustments to make or try. Ashwagandha is a great one.
Yeah, ashwagandha is so easy because it's like it's gonna work on everyone, and like we were talking about the Four Sigmatics event here, like the adaptogens are just so popular now for this reason. So ashwagandha, shatavari is another really good one for the hormones. Yeah, like Sun Potion has tons of great ones. So yeah,
So fun too. What was your question?
Oh, what is your take on eggs and fish?
So Ayurveda says you can eat anything and you can see anything as medicine. You don't have to be anything. But what changed in Ayurveda is a about like a few thousand years ago, Hinduism was invented, and Hinduism became a part of it. So a big part of Hinduism is this idea of karma, that whatever you eat has an effect. So eggs are not considered karmically pure because that egg could have become a chicken, even though now we're eating like fertilized eggs, and then fish as well. So if you're going to come in it from that perspective, they don't recommend it. I believe from a digestive perspective and what's going on right now, especially with the autoimmune, it's really, really hard for most people to be plant-based because so many people can't do lots of legumes and grains, especially if you're a vata. So vatas are the dosha that's the most likely to need animal products. Even in Ayurveda, it says their medicine, they should be eating, like it's written, lamb and bone broth and things like that. That's all part of it. But for example, if you're more kapha and you're eating lots of animal products, that might make you just get heavier. So it just depends. And if you have gut issues, it even says you're honoring the circle of life by taking the life of an animal because you need that to survive. So, yeah.
I just started eating eggs for the first time in like 12 years. I went through the whole candida thing, and I just was really low blood sugar. I would definitely love to be more just entirely plant-based, but I get low blood sugar, so I find if I eat a little bit of fish and some eggs, of course it's organic and wild, caught fish. But I was just curious if that could be put into the Ayurvedic.
For sure. It's like the hardest thing because, you know, with Ayurveda, it's such a like traditional thing that there's these like almost like guards of like, no, it has to be a certain way, but it's like, no, like do what works for your body.
You can kind of be a little bit like.
Right, and I mean, even in India, like in Kerala, they eat fish.
Right.
So in India, in North India, they eat meat. So I think it's like just do what works for you. And ancestrally also, we're all different. And if your ancestors were used to eating animal products, you probably need that.
In regards to people that tend to feel more bloated, what do you recommend that they eat more so they don't get so bloated?
Yeah. So that would be like the warming stuff, the cooked stuff, not the raw, not the cold. Like if you're drinking iced coffee first thing in the morning and then you're having a salad and a smoothie and then crackers, anything light and dry, it's all going to aggravate vata. So think like warm, sticky, oily, those qualities.
All the things that us, like as women, have kind of been taught to stray away from in the past, like 10 years, but are now like coming back to.
Right.
Yes. I want, unless there's any more questions, I want to close talking a little bit about turmeric because it touches on all these topics in such a great way, and I think Ayurveda is kind of like really masters, obviously, the use of turmeric. So let's talk about turmeric as an ingredient as our last topic. Also, you want to let people know where to find your book.
Yeah.
I mean, Amazon, obvi, but any other places you'd like people to check it out?
Well, this month it's $1.99 on Kindle.
Oh, wow.
So that's like amazing thing. So I recommend getting it on like Kindle if you haven't bought it yet. It is a harder book to read on Kindle because it's big, but they've actually done a really good job with it.
Good.
And you can find it at like Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, Target, like wherever.
Great.
Yeah.
And also for everyone, when you're leaving, please do enjoy the Free People shopping opportunity, but you also can take home a little Surya bread. Have you guys tried Surya bread before? Yeah, I'm like so hooked. And if there are juices left over, please